Welcome to Darkwatch Stories, where we bring to life the chills, the shadows, and the mysteries that linger in the dark. If you enjoy spine-tingling stories and want to support the journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now, sit back, dim the lights, and let's step into tonight's story. My name is Ryan Miller. I'm 31. Single, and my bank account is always hanging somewhere between barely surviving and time to sell blood again. This past year has been nothing but almost. Almost getting a steady job, almost paying rent on time, almost fixing the old truck so it stops leaking oil. After getting laid off from the warehouse in March, I've been living off whatever odd work I can get, as long as it pays cash, DoorDash, trash hauling, junk removal, picking up old stuff and flipping it, anything that can turn into money within the week. That's how I stumbled into storage locker auctions. It looks like digging through garbage, but sometimes you fish out gold. People abandon their whole lives behind a metal door and forget about it. I pay, crack the lock, and hope someone's past can rescue my future. Most of the time, it's just moldy couches, old tax paperwork, and broken electronics. But sometimes there's a vintage guitar, a rare film camera, a roll of untouched collectible coins. It feels a lot like gambling. You drop a few hundred on a closed door and pray there's something inside worth several times more. I like picking the lockers everyone avoids. Abandoned 7+ years. Owner deceased. Real trash. Funny thing is, that's where the gold usually hides. Last Tuesday, I went to an auction in Riverside. Industrial gray. Tucked behind a strip of dead shops, including a Payless that had probably been closed for a decade. Chain link fence rusted to the point of collapse. Only 5 units were up for bidding. The usual scavenger crowd clustered around a locker piled with wooden chairs and cabinets, oozing that mid-century vibe decor freaks drool over. I noticed a unit pushed slightly off to the side. Number 83. No photos, no detailed description. The paper just said, unopened since 2012, unable to contact renter, contents unknown. A faded red tag hung from the lock, and no one even glanced at it. The auctioneer said it would go last, no guarantees. Could be empty, could be full of rat shit, could be nothing but mold. I bid on it almost alone. 1, 2, 3. Nobody raised a paddle. It closed at $120. Weirdly cheap. The lock was heavy brass, military style. Not the cheap junk I'm used to cutting. The manager had to bring out bolt cutters, grumbling the whole time that the person who rented this unit only ever paid cash, left no number, never picked up the phone. The lock clattered onto the concrete with a dry metallic ring. I grabbed the handle and rolled the door up. A wave of old, thick air hit my face. Dust, rusted metal, and a faint cold tang like dried blood on steel pipe. Not empty, but not crammed full either. The first thing that made me shiver was how unnaturally neat it was. Most storage lockers are chaos. Cracked suitcases, cardboard boxes, ripped bags piled everywhere. This one was lined up in straight, careful rows. 2 plastic tubs full of books, lids labeled neatly. A tall wardrobe pressed against the back wall. Next to it, a heavy workbench like you'd see in a shop. Big, solid, its surface covered edge to edge in metal tools, not the usual hammers, drills, wrenches. These were things I couldn't name. On the bench lay blades, curved knives, hooks, clamps, and metal rods etched with strange symbols. Some looked like modified medical instruments, others like they'd been forged for one single job I didn't want to imagine. No random dust, no junk scattered around. Every tool sat in a deliberate spot, like a lab. I stepped in, and the space seemed to shrink, the air pressing down on my lungs. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few quick shots, gut instinct telling me I'd want proof if I found something wrong. When the phone's light swept across the back, I noticed the wardrobe wasn't just resting on the concrete. Its feet were bolted, welded, even straight into the floor. Someone really didn't want it moved. Curiosity won. I opened the doors. Inside was completely empty. No clothes, no boxes, just a floor panel that looked thicker than it should. I tapped it. The sound rang hollow, not solid, like normal wood or stone. My heartbeat picked up. I knelt and ran my fingers along the edges. I found a thin seam, a catch. I pressed. There was a soft times click asterisk, and the wardrobe floor lifted a fraction of an inch. I slid my fingers under the edge and hauled up. A whole square of floor came up like a hatch. Beneath it yawned a black hole. A steel ladder was bolted into the wall, descending into the dark. A dry, cold draft rushed up from below, smelling of old concrete. I stood there frozen, hands still gripping the edge. The sensible move was to close it, but I'd paid for this. Just thinking that made me feel stupid. On paper, this was my property. Whatever lay under that hole legally belonged to me. The thought was absurd and dangerous, but it pulled me closer to the edge. I grabbed a wrench off the bench and stuffed it into my jacket pocket like it could somehow serve as a weapon. Then I flicked on my phone's flashlight, shined it downward, and started climbing. The steel rungs creaked, but held. 10 feet, 15, 20. The air got colder, sliding through my jacket and raising goosebumps. I was shivering from the chill and from knowing I was doing something incredibly stupid. When my feet hit concrete, I didn't step forward. I swept the light around. A square room, sealed, no windows. A bunker hidden under a cheap storage unit. 4 raw concrete walls, undecorated, lined with metal shelving and steel trunks. From the ceiling hung a single naked bulb on a cloth-wrapped wire, dead for who knows how long. The air had a strange smell. Leather, damp paper, and a hint of ozone. The smell you get standing too close to a transformer. To my left, a row of black plastic tubs. On each lid, faded white lettering read, Hunter Kit #3, Eastern Variants, Photos, Verified Entities, 1,972, 2004, Salt, Silver, Bone. I muttered them under my breath, throat suddenly dry. To my right stood a map table. Dozens of paper maps pinned, folded, spread out. Many were stabbed with clusters of red pushpins, scribbled notes, and brown stains like old blood soaked into the paper. I opened one of the Hunter Kit tubs. Inside were wooden stakes, sanded smooth, tips sharpened, the dark grain stained as if they'd soaked in something for years. A heavy revolver nestled in foam, its metal frame engraved with strange patterns along the barrel. Glass vials of green, amber, and blue liquids, each marked with abbreviations I didn't understand. At the bottom lay a notebook. Half the pages had been ripped out. The rest were field notes. The handwriting was jagged, breathless. The 18th of June, 1996. Ogden, Utah. Type 2, mimic. Form, female. Posing as librarian. Went months without feeding, then broke pattern. Drained a family of 4. Burned nest. No survivors. No backup. Still hear it in my dreams tonight. Not sure we finished it. I dropped the notebook like it burned my hand. This wasn't some haunted attraction for horror tourists. I backed away, instinctively glancing up, wishing I could see the sky instead of unbroken mute concrete. The whole bunker carried the weight of a long, secret war I just walked into by accident. At the far end, a giant corkboard covered an entire wall, bolted in place with thick screws, red string webbed between photos, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, a maze of investigation stretched across decades. The photos made my skin crawl. Each had a name, age, location. The people looked ordinary, sitting on park benches, standing outside bars, walking down streets, posing for school pictures. But the longer I stared, the more wrong they seemed. One person's shadow fell in the wrong direction for the light. A girl's eyes had no pupils, just cloudy white. A man stood beside a glass door with no reflection inside. Then I saw the last photo. It was pinned low in a corner, half hidden under a faded receipt and a crooked tack. No name, no age, no location, just a black and white Polaroid of a man standing in front of a motel room door marked 6B, long coat, hands in his pockets, staring straight into the lens. His face was clear enough, but whenever I tried to really focus on it, my eyes seemed to slide off. I blinked and looked again. His smile was too wide, not clownish, but wrong in a way that made every tiny muscle in his face out of sync. His mouth curved at the wrong angle, cheeks lifted while his eyes stayed flat. The longer I looked, the more I became sure the background behind him, the motel wall, the tree was subtly shivering. I pulled the photo free and flipped it over. The back was smudged with pencil, letters pressed hard into the paper. Do not engage. Further surveillance required. See file 6B. I scanned the room. No filing cabinets, just trunks and chests. Eventually, I spotted an old steamer trunk, half covered by a tarp and a rusted folding chair. It was ridiculously heavy. Inside were dozens of folders, coded and labeled by year. I dug until I found file 6B. It was much thinner than the others. The first page was a map of Tennessee, a roadside motel circled in blue ink, room 6B marked with an X. Next to it, a note. Same subject, same face. 1,983, 1,996, 2009, 2022, unconfirmed, movement, westward. The years hit me in the chest like pins jabbing into the map. The following pages were photos, not gory, just grainy zoom-ins from a distance. Train stations, parking lots, quiet streets at night. But in some corner of each frame, he was there, sometimes in a sweater, sometimes a coat, sometimes a hat. At first glance, just a slightly outdated man in the background, but side by side, There was no missing it. The same face repeated across decades. He didn't age. Then came the typed incident reports. No author's name given. Encounter outside room 6B, outskirts of Chattanooga. Male subject enters and leaves room without using key. Gait, posture, facial structure perfectly consistent with 1,996 sighting, confirmed by 2 prior hunters. Next page. 2 locals missing. Phones last pinged near motel. Blood discovered in drainage pipe behind 6B. DNA inconclusive. Police unaware. The final entry read, "No viable neutralization strategy. Continue tracking west. Possible rail travel. Little to no sleep observed. Eyes reflective under infrared." The last line was just a grainy still from station CCTV in Kansas. Zoomed so far the image was mostly static, but there was no mistaking it. He was looking straight into the camera, eyes glowing faintly like an animal's. My scalp tingled. The trunk held at least 20 other files on different things. Feral changelings, I-5, chatterbox, caution. A few folders stained with old brown marks inside. But 6B felt different. Not a single case, but someone's lifelong pursuit. And it ended on an ellipsis. Last sighting 3 years ago, and then silence. Suddenly the bunker felt smaller. Concrete, shelves, bulletin board, all seemed half a step closer. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a low battery warning, the screen light dimming. I didn't want to be down here anymore. I carefully returned the file, shut the trunk, then pinned the Polaroid back exactly where I found it, red string slashing across his chest like a fake necklace. The man in the picture stared back at me. Same too wide smile, same cold eyes, same 6B door yawning behind him like a cave mouth. Something twisted in my gut told me that if I stared a few seconds longer, he would move. I killed my phone's light and climbed the ladder. With every rung I counted under my breath, afraid there'd be one extra step that didn't belong. At the top, I slammed the hatch shut and locked the catch. Then I closed the wardrobe doors and locked those too. When I stepped out of the unit, my hand shook so badly I almost dropped my keys. I rolled the door down and threaded the old red tag through the new lock, like that childish ritual could somehow seal the bunker. I knew it was useless, but I did it anyway. I gripped the steering wheel so hard on the drive home, my knuckles went white. Back in my cramped apartment, I tossed the keys on the table, kicked my dirty shoes into a corner, and collapsed onto the sunken futon. No lights, no food, just letting the darkness fill the room and hoping it was normal darkness. But the cold from that bunker seemed to cling to my clothes, seep into my skin. The images kept replaying. Red pins, files, the bunker, and most of all, the man at 6B with a wrong smile. For hours I lay there, trying to convince myself it was an elaborate setup by some maniac like an escape room for hardcore horror nerds. But paperwork that old? Mold that real? Stains sunk so deep into those maps, finger smudges on the metal handles? Dates that lined up too cleanly? There was no comforting explanation. Eventually, my body gave out and I slipped into sleep. I dreamed. In the dream, I stood again at the roll-up door of Unit 83. Only this time, nobody else was there, and the sky outside was the color of wet cement. The door rose on its own. I didn't touch it. The wardrobe stood open, its floor gone, just a gaping black hole. The steel ladder stretched down and down, far longer than before. From that darkness came a slow, deep breathing, like the bunker itself was inhaling and exhaling, waiting for me to climb down again. I jolted awake, shirt soaked with sweat. Late afternoon light slipped through the blinds, pale and weak. My heart pounded like I was still underground. I sat up, breathing hard, and realized I was about to do the one thing every horror movie says not to. Go back to the place you should have fled. My brain had decided before my mouth could protest. I dragged my backpack over and started packing. Flashlight, wrench, power bank, granola bars, bottles of water. This time I added gloves. I didn't want to touch anything down there with bare skin. I told myself I was only going back to be sure, to see if it was less terrifying in daylight, to film it, get evidence. The truth was, I knew I wasn't free yet, and I had the sick feeling whatever was under there wasn't done with me either. By the time I got back to the storage facility, the sun was sliding behind the dead strip mall, stretching the lamppost shadows, long and thin like bones. I parked off to the side, out of the camera's direct line. Unit 83 looked exactly the same. Door down, new lock in place, red tag untouched. No sign anyone else had been there. But it felt different, as if the place was waiting. I opened the lock and rolled the door up. For a split second, I thought everything inside had vanished. Wardrobe, bench, that metallic chill. But no, everything was still there. In the same positions, just quieter. I stepped inside and tugged the door down behind me. The clank of metal on concrete echoed. My flashlight beam cut straight to the wardrobe. I opened it, popped the floor catch, stared into the now familiar dark, then climbed down again. The steel was cold even through the gloves. I forced myself to move slowly, counting rungs so my eyes could adjust. At the bottom, I turned in a slow circle, light sweeping across the room. Same bunker, but the mood had shifted. This time I wasn't just a random intruder. I'd chosen to come back, and the space seemed to assess me. I didn't rush for the trunk of files. Instead, I stopped at the board. His Polaroid was still pinned there. Long coat, hands in his pockets, door 6B behind him. His eyes in the photo hadn't changed, but I somehow felt he knew I had returned. I took a breath, pressed the tack deeper into the cork, then moved along the shelves. Most boxes were labeled with abbreviations only someone in the trade would understand. One shelf held old camcorders, AV cables, and DV tapes, labeled 6B Daylight, Fixed Cam, 2009, 6B No Audio. Do not watch alone. I didn't have gear to play them, but the idea of what might be on those tapes turned my spine to ice. The next shelf stored a tub marked Entity Logs, Classified, Primary Threats. Inside were spiral notebooks, sticky notes, printed emails with thick black redactions. I flipped quickly until a hand-drawn page stopped me. Not a hurried sketch, but something like courtroom art. Him, the man from the Polaroid, but warped. Fingers too long, mouth gaping wider, filled with small, perfectly even teeth, like a shark's. His eyes were just smeared shadows, as if someone tried to erase them. Underneath, the smile doesn't move. It only widens. On the last shelf sat a single black box with a lock. A scrap of paper was taped to the lid. If found, do not act alone. See Journal Red A. I scanned for anything labeled Red A and found nothing. Everything else was cold. Impersonal codes. Finally, I spotted a low metal cabinet shoved into a corner, hidden behind sacks marked Bone Dust. Clean. The bottom drawer was crushed and padlocked. The top drawer was slightly ajar, like someone had slammed it shut in a hurry and missed. I pulled it open. Inside was a single red leather notebook. The edges were curled, one corner charred, and in the center was a symbol branded into the cover, a stylized letter A. My heart skipped half a beat. Red A. I sat on the concrete and opened it with shaking hands. The writing was dense, measured, cold, no emotion. It read like an accountant's ledger, except the subject was monsters. The first half was a catalog of creatures, code names, types, weaknesses, classifications. Most of the terms were ones I'd never seen before. Twisted words that sounded like they came from some dead language. Halfway through, the ink darkened and a header was underlined over and over. 6B, code, blackout. I swallowed and turned the page. First confirmed sighting, 1952, Missouri. Image matches 1967, 1981, 2009. Same face, same clothing, no signs of aging. All attempts at tailing. Subject enters room 6B. Door closes. No one has ever observed it leaving. Below was a list of locations, roadside motels, each with the same room layout. There was always a room 6B in the same position along the building, feeds discreetly, rarely leaves bodies. Targets appear selective, not random. Pattern unknown. Evidence to date, disappearances, blood in drainage systems, personal effects left behind. Next page. Silver ineffective. Religious symbols ineffective. Subject maintains perfect human form in daylight. Night behavior not clearly recorded. All video footage heavily distorted. The lines read like exhaustion. Then came a sketch that made my hair stand on end. A man with his coat thrown open, and instead of flesh inside, his rib cage had unfolded like insect wings. From the cavity spilled dozens of small skeletal arms. Below, last observed form, Hunter R. Whitlock, missing as of 2009, Georgia. No body recovered. The next page held the final entry, letters slanting, rushed, shadowed subject to roadside motel, room 6B, confirmed ongoing activity, no recorded exit from room, waited 9 hours, approach at 2:31, a.m. knocked, door opened, subject standing there, awake, expecting me. The next line wavered, fired 3 shots into chest at close range, center mass, no fall. It smiled, spoke my name. The last sentence wasn't just written, it was gouged into the paper. I never told it my name. That was it. No more pages. No author deceased. No mission failed. Just silence. I closed the notebook. The room sank into a different kind of quiet, thicker, heavier. I sat there long enough for my legs to go numb. Only one truth hammered in my skull. A hunter as skilled as Whitlock had failed and vanished. The thing he hunted was still out there, walking motel hallways nobody remembered. I wasn't a hunter. No silver bullets, no charms, no idea how to read the symbols on that hooked piece of silver. I was just a broke guy who bought the wrong storage unit. I should have locked it, tossed the key, pretended I'd never found any of it. But that thought dragged another uglier shadow behind it. Knowing something like this existed, knowing it preyed on innocent people and turning away anyway. I couldn't stomach that. In the end, I slid Red A into my backpack, took a few more photos of the board, maps, and kits, then climbed up. This time I sealed the hatch like a grave, twisting the latch over and over. The air inside the locker felt thicker now, sticking to my skin. On the drive back, I didn't turn on the radio, didn't really see the road. My mind held only one unspoken name I'd given it. Mr. 6, the man in room 6B. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, spreading out Red A and a yellow notepad, copying down names, years, locations. Most victims were only recorded by first name. Lisa, 21, 1981. Miguel, 34, 1996. Many were just male. 19 Texas with a question mark, but the time gaps were clear. 1952, 1967, 1981, 1996, 2009, roughly 13 years apart. If that held, the next would be 2022. This year, my mouth filled with a bitter taste. The sketch in Red A showed a motel door with a 6B, a tree beside it, a long balcony. I opened my old laptop and started searching. Roadside motels, states, trees, roof lines, layouts. 3 hours later, eyes burning, fingers numb, I found a photo that looked like it had stepped right out of the Polaroid. A motel in Texas off I-10, room 6B in the exact same position, with the same big tree beside it. The motel's website looked like it had been built in 2005 and abandoned ever since. Blurry photos, ugly fonts, but still online. I dialed the number listed. It rang for a long time before a tired woman picked up. I asked if anyone was staying in room 6B, spinning some story about tracing old family memories. She went quiet for a moment, then said yes. The room was rented long-term, cash only. The guest had been there 6 weeks. I asked for a name. She hesitated, said she couldn't give out guest information. But while she muttered about that guy giving me the creeps, she slipped up and said enough. My chest tightened like someone had cinched a strap around it. I hung up while she was still saying hello. I stood frozen in my kitchen. Suddenly everything slotted into place like pins in a map. Motel, 6B, long-term cash guest, 13-year cycle. I started packing. Travel bag, clothes, flashlight, Red A, phone, notebook, some cash. While zipping it, my eyes landed on the work table, where I'd absent-mindedly left one tool I'd brought back from the bunker and then forgotten. A strange silver hook, not sharp like a knife, curved like something used in a ritual. Symbols were carved deep along its length, worn by years of handling. I hesitated, then dropped it into the bag. If Whitlock had carried it, maybe, I told no one. posted nothing online. I just drove along the GPS arrow, across desert and through small towns, eating cold sandwiches in parking lots, grabbing naps at gas stations. A day and a half later, I reached the outskirts where the motel sat. I booked a room at another inn a mile away, chose a room facing the road. Every night I parked across from that motel, watching 6B through a second-hand pair of binoculars. The door to 6B stayed shut, curtains closed, but between 2 and 3 in the morning, the room light always came on. No silhouette on the curtains, no movement in or out, just the light switching on and off, like someone flicking it by habit. On the 4th night, another car pulled in close to midnight. A young woman stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder, long dark hair. She went to the office, checked in, took a key, room 6A, right next to 6B. I followed her car through the binoculars. The license plate led me to a name in a cheap database I just paid $15 to access. Kelsey Romero, 23, Phoenix. No record, nothing special. Just a normal person, but in red A. The victims of 6B were never bad people or strange cases. They were just the ones who crossed its path at the wrong place, the wrong year. That thought sank in my stomach. I didn't sleep that night either, just stared at the Polaroid of Mr. 6. On the 3rd night after Kelsey checked in, I saw her step out at 1:45 a.m., leaning against the railing, smoking, staring at the dark woods behind the motel. Her posture sagged someone who hadn't slept in days. I reached my limit. I drove over, parked in the lot, walked under the 2nd floor walkway. I knocked on 6A. After a moment, the door opened a crack, chain still on. She looked out, eyes wary. "I'm not here to sell you anything," she said flatly. "I know," I answered, forcing my voice steady. "My name's Ryan. This is gonna sound insane, but I just need 2 minutes. If you think I'm crazy, I'll leave." She said nothing, eyes flicking from me to the parking lot, calculating escape routes. I added, "I'm here because of room 6B. Her expression changed instantly. A flicker of fear crossed her face. She opened the door a little wider. "Why are you asking about 6B? She demanded softly. I pulled the Polaroid from my pocket and set it on the door handle. It shook slightly in the corridor light. The man in the coat stood at a door identical to the one next to us. "I found this in a bunker under a storage locker," I said. "It belonged to a man who tracked him for decades. He always shows up at room 6B every 13 years. She stared at the photo, lips going bloodless. Right then, the hallway light above us clicked, buzzed, and went out. The filament whined in the dark. Through the crack in her door, I saw her room light flicker, dim, then flare again. She sucked in a sharp breath. I kept quiet and let the silence stretch. Eventually, she stepped out, closed the door behind her, and stood beside me on the walkway, arms folded tight across her chest. "You've got 1 minute," she said. "Talk." We sat on the concrete edge of the walkway, backs to the railing, Polaroid lying between us. She kept her distance, body angled toward the nearest exit. I talked about Unit 83, the wardrobe, the hidden hatch, the bunker, Red A, Whitlock, the appearances of 6B. She never interrupted, eyes locked on that warped smile in the picture. Every now and then, the light in her room gave a little cough of brightness. "The weird thing is," I said slowly, None of the victims in the journal were criminals or freaks. They were just people who happened to brush past his life at the wrong 6B in the wrong 13th year. She looked up at me. So what? You think I'm next on the list? I didn't answer directly. I think there's something here no cop will ever see. Something someone already died trying to stop. And you're in the room right next to its door. She bit her lip, eyeing the thin wall between 6A and 6B. I heard scratching, she whispered. Last night, in the wall. At first I thought rats, but the door to 6B is sealed. Nobody goes in or out. There's no reason there'd only be rats' times behind that times wall. I remembered a note from Red A, scratching in adjacent room walls, no sign of gnaw marks. My back went cold. If I were you, I said, I'd leave this place tonight. Good idea, she said immediately. I'm not stupid enough to stay. She picked up the photo, studied it longer, then handed it back. Do you really think he's something other than human? I looked towards 6B. Its light still off. I think he doesn't age. I think people have died trying to keep him from feeding. I think Whitlock heard his own name from something that had never met him before that night. I glanced at her. That's enough to make me believe. Her room light flickered one more time. Both of us turned towards 6B's door. Still closed. Still the same dull curtains. But the air felt thicker. I'm gonna pack, she said quickly. You don't have to do anything else. I stood with her. I'll stay until you're in the car, I said. She thought for a second, then nodded. Fine, just don't touch my stuff. Room 6A looked boring enough to be a stock photo. Single bed, old TV, open suitcase, clothes on the chair, toothbrush on the sink. But the feeling was not normal. I stood by the door, eyes on the bare wall we shared with 6B. She moved fast, stuffing clothes, zipping bags, wrapping chargers. The AC hummed steadily. Then times scritch, times a faint scratching sound, like a fingernail against wood from the other side of the wall. She froze mid-room, still holding her jacket, her eyes locked onto mine. I nodded once. No need for words. She slammed the suitcase shut and yanked it upright. Done, she whispered. We were almost at the door when the TV turned on behind us. No sound. Screen black, except for pale streaks drifting sideways like light leaking through pipes underwater. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure in the middle, and then it was gone. I yanked the plug. The screen glowed for one extra beat before dying. I'm never staying here again, she said, voice hard now. We stepped out onto the walkway. Her hands shook as she turned the key. I'm going to drive until sunrise, she muttered. Then call my brother. I was about to wish her luck when every hair on my neck stood up. At the far end of the lot, a man was standing there, as if he'd been there all along and I'd just noticed. Straight posture, motionless, facing us. Don't look, I said softly. Just walk to the car. But reflex won. She turned her head. When her eyes reached the spot where I'd seen him, the lot was empty. No footsteps, no sliding shadow, no door creaking shut, just bare asphalt under the streetlight. She unlocked her car and slid into the driver's seat. I stood beside the door, fingers tight around the Polaroid in my pocket, the paper cold as stone. What about you? She asked through the gap. What are you gonna do? I'll be fine, I lied. She studied me like she wanted to argue, then turned away and twisted the key. The starter whined dryly once and died. Second try, a grinding whir, no ignition. Third, silence. The headlights flickered, then went out. I already knew what I'd see if I turned around, but I turned anyway. He was back, not at the far end this time, but halfway across the lot, only a few dozen steps away. And he wasn't walking, he was gliding. He slid over the pavement, coat hanging heavy like it had been soaked. One by one, every bulb in the lot exploded. Asterisk, pop, 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 asterisk, shards raining down as the light snuffed out in a straight line toward us. With each bulb gone, the darkness thickened, like black water slowly rising. "Get in the car!" she screamed, voice cracking. We dove inside. The doors slammed, but the cold rushed in instantly, slicing through our clothes. She twisted the key. The engine gave only a dry click. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. Sweat slicked my palms under the gloves. He was now only a few steps from the hood, face still turned toward us, head barely moving, but his gaze drilling through the windshield. The smile hadn't changed, patient, lips drooping just enough to say he'd already won. Time stretched like sticky candy. The cold in the car didn't feel like weather. It felt like something was sucking the life out of the air. I remembered the silver hook in my pocket. My hand fumbled for it, fingers brushing metal so cold it felt wet. I pulled it out and unfolded the hooked end. It wasn't sharp like a blade. It felt like something meant to snag onto the invisible. The worn symbols along its curve caught the last scraps of light. Kelsey stared. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I opened the door and stepped onto the damp asphalt. He was only a few yards away. Not walking, not sliding now, just times there, asterisk. I held the hook out in front of me, like a believer thrusting across. My hand was shaking so hard the metal rattled. "Back off," I whispered, voice barely there. He didn't move, but for a moment, something in his eyes rippled, like water touched by a fingertip. The headlights flared on by themselves, as if someone inside turned the key. "Try it again," I shouted over my shoulder. The starter choked, caught, then roared to life. The engine sounded like a scream. He cocked his head slightly, the smile cracking, then fading at the edges. I didn't wait to see more. I dove back into the passenger seat and slammed the door. "Reverse. Hard." Kelsey dropped it into gear. The tires skidded on gravel, the rear bumper missing him by inches before we shot onto the road. In the rearview mirror, I only had time to see him standing perfectly still, one hand raised in a lazy wave, framed by the row of dark rooms. The blown bulbs never reignited. We drove until the bright parking lot of a shiny diner appeared, full of people going in and out, the clatter of dishes and dull laughter spilling out. I dropped Kelsey there and told her to stay inside until sunrise, call family, and to avoid Texas for a long time. When I returned to my apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Door locked, blinds closed, dirty dishes in the sink. But on the table in the middle of the kitchen lay a small slip of paper. I hadn't left anything there before I left town. Yellowed paper, heavy, trembling handwriting. "Light won't save you." I didn't check the closets, didn't look under the bed. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed in extra gear, and left, slamming the door like I was trying to outrun my own skin. We met again at Unit 83 the next day. Neither of us had slept much. Kelsey looked washed out, but not surprised by the bunker. It was like a part of her had already believed me the moment she heard scratching in the wall. From then on, we almost never left. We turned the bunker into a shelter. Thin mattresses, shelves of canned food and water, salt poured in rings around every doorframe, every vent, every crack in the concrete. Salt, silver, ground bone we scattered, poured, filled little bags, sewed them into our shoes. We lived on canned meals, bottled water, instant coffee, and dread. Twice in 3 months, I saw faint footprints on the concrete right up against the salt line, like someone had been standing right outside, not stepping in. There was never a knock. I didn't need to ask what Kelsey thought. She slept with her shoes on and her coat within arm's reach. Red A lay open on the table among files, maps, photos. We remarked cases. Red pins for sightings. Black pins for deaths, white pins for us, the only two who had, for now, slipped out of 6B's grip. I slept with Whitlock's revolver under my pillow, even knowing it had once done nothing. Every night, sometime after midnight, the motion light above the hatch flicked on for a single heartbeat, then off again. We pretended not to notice. Instead of hiding forever, we started planning. Kelsey combed the files, looking for shared traits, jobs, habits, arrival times, disappearance dates. I traced his movements on the maps, measuring distance, looking for a rhythm. He always left a place before the 13th year ended, always switched motels but kept the layout the same. Same room number, same relative location in the row, always 6B, and there was always someone unlucky staying beside him. Last week, we found a case from 1,970 Inches, Arkansas, a motel off a major road, room 6B sealed after the housekeeper vanished. The photos in the file matched my Polaroid. Same coat, same wrong smile. The next projected appearance had already been circled on the map. Only 6 months from now. Next cycle, he'll pick somewhere else. Next cycle, if there's a target, we want to be there first. We don't kid ourselves about being heroes. The plan isn't kill the monster. It's jam its schedule, pull people out of 6A, 6C, off that hallway, out of his line of sight, before another red pin appears on the map. We learned from Whitlock's failure. Don't stand alone in front of 6B at 231A. Don't trust silver. Don't put your faith in light. We trust salt, analog film, and the feeling of terror crawling up your spine. Our bags stay packed. Lace is always tied. Kelsey's better at talking, so she handles check-ins, chats up clerks, catches little details cops ignore. I handle exit routes, side doors, cameras, angles, parking spots. We've trained ourselves not to sleep near doors, not to turn around if we hear scratching a third time. We never photograph him with our phones, only on film, because it seems like film catches his true shape more clearly. We haven't won anything. If anything, we're just delaying his next meal. But scattered among the red pins on the death map, there are a few white ones now, people we managed to pull out of some random room before the 13th night hit. Some nights I wake up because the hatch light clicks on and off in a single instant. In the dark, I think about that cracked smile at 6B and the words on the note. Light won't save you. Maybe that's true. Light won't save us, but the map still has empty spaces. There's room for more white pins, and as long as we keep hearing that brief click of the light above us, We'll stay here in this bunker, keeping the salt lines unbroken, eyes on whatever 6B door he chooses next. We're not winning, but we'll keep pulling out whoever we can, right up until that door opens again at 231A, men. Thank you for listening to Darkwatch Stories. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can keep bringing you more. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware of what might be watching in the dark.